In January 1982, yachtsman Stephen Callahan, 30 years old, departed from one of Canary Islands on the Napoleon Solo, a 6.5-meter sloop he designed and built himself. He headed for Antigua when he dropped out of the race in La Coruña, Spain. In a growing gale, 7 days out, his vessel was badly holed by an unknown object. By the way, in his book, Callahan writes that he suspects the damage occurred from a collision with a whale during a night storm and became swamped. Although it didn't sink outright due to watertight compartments Callahan had designed into the boat. Unable to stay aboard Napoleon Solo as it filled with water and was overwhelmed by breaking seas, Callahan escaped into a 6-person Avon inflatable life raft, measuring about 6 feet across. He stood off in the raft, but managed to get back aboard several times to dive below and retrieve a piece of cushion, a sleeping bag, and an emergency kit containing, among other things, some food, navigation charts, a short spear gun, flares, torch, solar stills for producing drinking water, and a copy of Sea Survival, a survival manual. Before dawn, a big breaking sea parted the life raft from Napoleon Solo and Callahan drifted away. The raft drifted westward with the south equatorial current and the trade winds. After exhausting the meager food supplies he had salvaged from the sinking sloop, Callahan survived by catching food. He mainly ate mahi-mahi and triggerfish, which he speared, along with flying fish, barnacles, and birds that he captured.
Obviously, in that situation, you're on a pretty much an all-protein diet. Although I made sure that I ate pretty much all parts of the fish, because organ meats and things might have vitamins and things that the flesh didn't. And I would eat as much fresh as I could as soon as I could, in part because it takes fluid to digest proteins in food, and the drier it gets, the more cooked it is, the more moisture that would take. And I had only about maybe a pint and a quarter or so of water a day, where I wasn't really swallowing water. I was just take a sip and it'd be sort of absorbed by my mouth. So dehydration was a really difficult problem for me. But if the fish were pretty big, so I would strip them up and hang them up to dry, which essentially is cooking them. So I had this like hard tack for days when I didn't have fresh fish. But I also would like to note this, that, I thought, oh my God, you read these survival stories and go, oh, I could never do that. I could never eat this. I could never eat uncooked fish or whatever. Well, besides the fact that sushi is very popular now, and I like sushi, I found it was very interesting how your body changes your psychology, because the longer the voyage went, the less I could taste salty stuff. So if I had a little bit of saltwater pollution in fresh water, I would still drink it, but I was the salt water tasted less and less salty as time went on, and the flesh of the fish tasted less and less salty, so it wasn't as delicious as it was. But what I really looked forward to, what my body really wanted and what I wanted, were all the fresh fish guts. Give me a fresh fish liver, give me a fresh fish eyes. Oh, those are little nuggets of fluid and things like that. And I know it sounds kind of horrible now, but if you're ever stuck in that situation and you're actually starving, your body will change your psychology.
The sea life was all part of an ecosystem that followed him for 3,300 kilometers across the ocean. He collected drinking water from 2 solar stills and various jury-rigged devices for collecting rainwater, which together produced on average just over a pint of water per day. Callahan's use of an emergency position indicating radio beacon and many flares didn't trigger a rescue. Theirs was not monitored by satellites at the time, and he was in too empty a part of the ocean to be heard by aircraft. Ships didn't spot his flares. While adrift, he spotted 9 ships, most in the 2 sea lanes he crossed, but from the beginning, Callahan knew that he couldn't rely upon rescue but instead must, for an undetermined time, rely upon himself and maintaining a shipboard routine for survival. He routinely exercised, navigated, prioritized problems, made repairs, fished, improved systems, and built food and water stocks for emergencies. On the eve of April 20th, 1982, he spotted lights on the island of southeast of Guadeloupe. The next day, On Callahan's 76th day float in the raft, fishermen picked him up just offshore, drawn to him by birds hovering over the raft, which were attracted by the ecosystem that had developed around it. During the ordeal, he faced sharks, raft punctures, equipment deterioration, physical deterioration and mental stress. Having lost a third of his weight and being covered with scores of saltwater sores, he was taken to a local hospital for an afternoon, but left that evening and spent the following weeks recovering on the island and while hitchhiking on boats up through the West Indies. During his journey, Callahan experienced a few positive elements aside from suffering, describing the night sky at one point as a view of heaven from a seat in hell. He still enjoys sailing in the sea, which he calls the world's greatest wilderness. Since his survival drift, he's made dozens of additional offshore passages and ocean crossings, most of them with no more than 2 other crew. In the making of the 2012 movie Life of Pi, director Ang Lee asked Callahan to be a consultant on living aboard a life raft. Callahan made lures and other tools seen in the movie. Callahan recounted his ordeal in the best-selling book Adrift, 76 Days Lost at Sea.